Hi guys, so welcome to another video. So do you want to do some video conferencing, maybe just chat to your friends, family or work colleagues, and you want to do it all privately hosted on your own server? Well, Jitsi is what you need. So if that sounds interesting, then let's get started. Okay, so I'm sure we've all used some sort of video conferencing software before, whether it's FaceTime with iOS, but then what are you going to do if you don't have an iOS device? Well, maybe you can use Skype. Well, no thank you, I don't think I want to use Skype, no matter how happy this guy looks here using it. So some people have been using Zoom recently, but all of these solutions, they go through someone else's server. And if you take your privacy really seriously, then maybe you should consider using Jitsi. It's very secure, it's totally free, there's no time limits of like 40 minutes like Zoom, and the best of all, we can run it on our own server. Now, can I hear you asking, is it easy to set up? Well, it's not too bad, if you follow the guide anyway. But really, I hate to break it to you, if you watch my videos, you are a nerd. And us nerds don't always take the easiest way to do things, but we do things the best way. So why use a video conferencing system that goes through someone else's server when you can set it up on your own and have full control of all of your data? And hey, look at these guys using Jitsi. Some of them even look almost as happy as the people using Skype. So here I've got it running on one of my servers. And before I start this video, I'm going to kind of start it the wrong way round. I'm going to show you Jitsi running because I want to just talk about the authentication that Jitsi uses. I'm showing this now so you can choose whether you want to use authentication or not before you do the install, because during the install you're going to have to choose whether you do or not. Now if you have it with no authentication at all, anyone can come here and start a meeting just by typing in the name of the meeting that they want. You just allow the camera, and inside of your browser you can have a conference with anyone you want. For someone to join this meeting, they'd have to know the name of the meeting that you created. There's no kind of public lists of all the meetings running. Also, the person who creates the meeting can make it more secure so random people can't just join by creating a password for that particular meeting. That password would have to be shared with all of the participants who wanted to be able to join. So now let's hop onto another Jitsi server where the authentication is running. Now this time on this server, when we go to create a meeting, it's going to ask us to authenticate ourselves by entering the credentials of a user that's stored on the Jitsi server. This basically stops people from randomly finding your page and using it to host their own meetings. So I think it's best to always have authentication, and the creator of meetings can make it more secure by choosing a password for the meeting as well. But all of these authentication methods are optional, and it's up to you how you want to run your server. Okay, so let's carry on. Now there's a few things that we're going to have installed to be able to use Jitsi. We're going to need a reverse proxy, and in this video I'm using the Linux server guy's Let's Encrypt container, which I think is excellent. Now if you don't have a reverse proxy set up, then I've got a video showing how to set up Let's Encrypt that you can watch here. Now also we're going to have to forward some ports to our Unraid server. Of course we're going to need the ports forwarded to our reverse proxy that we always use, but in addition to that we should forward port UDP 10,000 also to the IP address of our Unraid server. Now we're going to install Jitsi and Docker, and Jitsi takes up multiple Docker containers, 4 in all. Now we're not going to install these containers in the normal way that we normally would on Unraid by using community applications. We're going to install it using something called Docker Compose, which allows us to install multiple containers all at once. So it's really easy. Docker Compose isn't installed by default on Unraid, it only takes a few moments to do so. So let's start with that. Okay, so the first thing we need to install on our server is a program called Docker Compose, and we're going to do that from the command line. So click on the button to open the terminal window, and then paste in the following command. Now all of the commands in this video are going to be in a file in the description, so you can just copy and paste them easily. Yeah, it really is that simple. Docker Compose is now installed. But there's one more thing we have to do before it works, because if we try and use Docker Compose, we'll get a permissions error. Here I'm just checking the Docker Compose version, and you can see now it says permission denied. So all we have to do is actually change the permission of the file. So again, just paste in this command, the chmod plus x command here, and that will make the Docker Compose file executable. So I'm going to run the command to check the Docker version again, and this time I'm getting no error, it's telling me the version. Okay, so that's Docker Compose installed, so we can leave the terminal window now. So the next thing we need to install to make things easier is a container called Portainer. So let's jump on over to the Apps tab and do a search for Portainer. Okay, so now click on the icon to install. Now there's nothing we need to fill in the template at all. The container uses port 9000, so as long as you've got nothing else that uses that port, you can just click on apply to pull down the container. Okay, so once it's installed, we'll come back to this page here. So click on the little world icon to kind of go to the web UI. Then here we just need to make a username and password. I'm going to leave my username as admin and then just pop in a password twice below and click on create user. So with the user created, it brings us to this screen here. So we want to click onto local. By clicking local will allow us to connect to the Unraid server's Docker service. So click on connect in the bottom left, and now I'm connected to my Unraid server. You can see here it says local. If I click onto that, then I can see all the containers that are running on my server. But we're not going to use Portainer yet, we're going to carry on just setting it up. So go back to home, and then on the right hand side next to where it says group unassigned, you'll see a little edit button. Click onto that, and here we can just put in some info about our server. I'm changing mine from being called local to prime, which is the name of my server, and where it says public IP address, I'm actually going to put in my LAN IP address of the server. For me that's 10.10.20.199. Yours will be different. So click on to update endpoint, and that's all of the configuration now done. Clicking on the home button, we can see now that my server is listed and it's called prime. Okay, so we're going to come back to using Portainer later, but now we want to go back to our Unraid server. So the next thing that we're going to do now is we're going to create a location for us to install Jitsi into. We want to install Jitsi into the app data share. So let's click onto the shares tab and have a look inside the app data folder. So across on the right hand side from the app data, I'm going to click on its view icon here. And obviously if I look down through the folders in my app data share, well of course I'm not going to find a folder for Jitsi. So let's create one. Let's open the terminal again, and for all you people who are going, oh no, not the terminal again, come on, it's not that bad, all you have to do is copy and paste commands into here. It's really easy. So we're going to paste in this long make directory command, and what it's doing is it's making a folder and then various subfolders which Jitsi is going to use. Okay, so they're created now. And if you want to just check, then minimize the terminal window, then just refresh this page, and there we have the Jitsi folder there. And inside of that, we've got all these other folders that it's going to be using. So all the folders were created properly. So let's go back to our terminal window again now, and now let's create another folder where we're going to download some things from GitHub that we're going to use to install the containers that we need for Jitsi. Now this command is going to make a directory in the folder we have for Jitsi inside the app data. It's going to make a folder called GitHub, and then the second part of the command after the and, this is just going to change directory into that folder that we've just created there. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter to execute that command, and here we are now inside of that folder. Let's make a little bit of space. Right, okay, so what's next? Well, obviously if we type ls and look inside of this folder, there's nothing here yet. That's because we need to pull down the files we need from GitHub. So let's paste in the next command, the git clone one, then hit enter, and you can see now it's pulled down all of the files that I need. So now when we list the files by typing ls, we can see a whole bunch of files that have been pulled down. Okay, let's make some space again, and now type or paste in the next command. Nano space env.example, and then hit enter. Okay, so we've opened this text file in the text editor Nano. Okay, so this text file contains a bunch of variables that's going to be used by Docker Compose in a moment when we install the Jitsi containers. Okay, so the first thing you can see here is a bunch of passwords that it's asking for. Now we don't need to actually fill that in at all, because in a moment we're going to use a program that's going to generate some really strong passwords for those 6 things. But the first thing that we want to change is actually the location of the configuration directory, and that's this line here. So I'm going to delete what's already in here, and then we need to paste in the Jitsi app data location that we just created earlier. Now again, this whole line is in the description, so you can just copy and paste the whole lot. Okay, so next we're going to scroll down till we come to the system time. Then you want to adjust the system time to your time zone. By default it's Europe Amsterdam. I'm in the UK, so I'm going to change my time zone to Europe London. Okay, so underneath here we've got the public URL for the web service. Now we're going to enable that and change it. To enable it, just remove the hashtag from the front of the line like this. And now put in the subdomain and URL that you have pointing to your Let's Encrypt container. Now of course you don't put meet.yourdomain.com. I just mean you put in your subdomain of whatever your domain is. Okay, so underneath here we've got the section IP address of the Docker host. Again, we want to remove the hashtag from the beginning of the line to activate that. And then we want to change the IP address here to be the same as what your Unraid server is, because your Unraid server is the Docker host in this situation. Now my IP address is 10.10.20.199. You can see it at the top here. So I'm going to type that in here. Now scrolling down, ignore this bit where it says Let's Encrypt configuration. We don't need to fill any of this in. Now the next bit we need to fill in, well, that is if you want to actually have authentication on the Jitsi server. If you're not bothered and you want it totally open, you can ignore this part. But I really suggest that you have authentication on the server just to stop people being able to create their own meetings without your permission. So to enable the authentication, we just take away the hashtag in front of that, so it says enable auth equals 1. What this does is means that users have to authenticate onto the Jitsi server, so they have to be set up with a username and password. So when set like this, everyone starting a meeting or joining a meeting will need to have a user account on the Jitsi server. Now this isn't always very convenient. So what I'm going to do as well underneath is I'm going to enable guests by removing the hashtag in front of this line, enable_guests equals 1. What this will do is allow people who go onto my Jitsi server to join a meeting that's already created without having to authenticate having their own username and password on the Jitsi server. But these guests can't create their own meeting. Oh yeah, and one other thing, you can actually add a password to each individual meeting when it's created. And when that password's created, anyone that joins that particular meeting will have to know the password to join in. So even with guest access, it's still pretty secure. But we'll be looking at all of that later on in the video when we've got the server up and running. Okay, so moving on, underneath here we're going to change the authentication type to internal and just remove the hashtag from this line to enable that. Okay, cool, so that's all the authentication set up. And if we scroll down through all of this, I don't think there's anything else we actually need to set up here. No, that's everything we need to edit, so now we can press Ctrl and O to write out the file, then enter. Then we can exit the Nano text editor by pressing Ctrl and X. Now we're back into the terminal here. So let's clear the screen. Okay, so the file that we edited was the example file. So now we need to copy it to the actual working file, the .env file. So paste this copy command into the terminal. This part here, the CP part, is the copy command. Then we're copying the env.example that we just edited. And we're copying it to be this name here, the .env file. So hit enter, and that file's copied. Now if you were to list the files in this directory, you won't actually see the file. That's because a file with a dot in front of it is basically invisible. So it is there and it has been copied. Now remember earlier when I said don't bother putting in those passwords in the file we just edited because we're going to use a program to create some, well now's the time to do that. And to create those passwords we're going to run this script here. So in terminal either type or paste the following gen-passwords.sh. Then just hit enter to generate those passwords. Okay, so that's everything ready. Now we can pull down the containers and install them on the server. Okay, so let's clear the screen. And now paste in the following command, docker-compose up -d and hit enter. Okay, so it's pulling down the containers and that's done. Okay, so that's all of the difficult bits done now, so we can close this. Go back to the Unraid server and then to the Docker tab, and here we can see 4 new containers. Now these containers are part of a group or what's known as a stack. Now because we installed these with Docker Compose, we can't actually manage them from the Unraid web UI. You can see here there's no button to edit and there's no button saying web UI. We can only start, stop and pause them. However, from Portainer we can manage these containers. So I'm logging into my Portainer instance now. I'm going to pop in my username and password. And here we are back on the Portainer homepage. I'm going to click on this icon here to log into my server Prime. And here we can see Portainer says I've got one stack running. So I'm going to click onto stack. And this stack is named Docker Jitsi Meet. So I'm going to click onto that. And there are the 4 containers that make up this stack. Those same containers that we just saw on the Unraid Docker tab. Now there's a couple of changes we have to make to these containers. The first of which being changing the network that these containers are running on. So I'm going to go to this first container at the top of the list and scroll down to the very bottom of the page, and here we can see the network that this container is currently running on. And it's running on a custom network that Docker Compose created when we installed the containers. But we need these containers to be running on the same network that our Let's Encrypt reverse proxy is, and for me that's the network called ProxyNet. So I'm going to click onto that and then click this blue Join Network button here. Okay, so now the containers join that network, and looking at the bottom again, we can see it's now a member of 2 networks. We don't need that top Jitsi Meet network, so I'm going to click on Leave Network, so this container is then only connected to the ProxyNet network. Okay, so now we need to do exactly the same for all of the other containers that are part of the stack, so I'm going to quickly go through and do that now. I won't bore you with letting you watch me do this, so I'm going to speed it right up. Okay, so now all members of this stack are a part of the ProxyNet network. So the last thing we need to do here is change the name of all these Docker containers. And yes, it is important to do this, so don't skip this part. So let's start with the one at the top here, this Jacofo container. So after clicking on its name, it brings us to this page here again. If we click onto this little edit icon here, it will allow us to change the name. So I'm going to delete this out and then call the container focus.meet.jitsi. With that done, I'm going to click this little tick icon here to confirm the changes, and we can see it says the container's successfully been renamed. Okay, so on to the next one. Let's rename this one here the JVB container. So again, click onto it, click the edit button, and this container, we're going to name it video.meet.jitsi. And again, click on the tick to confirm. And so now let's rename the next one. Let's rename the web one here. And this container, we're going to name it meet.jitsi. Okay, so let's finally rename the last one, this Proxy container at the bottom. This one we need to name xmpp.meet.jitsi. Okay, so that's all of our containers now renamed. That's everything we need to do in Portainer. Now if you happen to click on any of these here, then basically none of these are going to work. That's expected at the moment because we need to set up the reverse proxy. So we can close the Portainer web interface now. Now if your Let's Encrypt reverse proxy container is running, then make sure you stop it now. Okay, then go to your desktop and then download the Jitsi proxy config from the description of this video. Once you've done that, you need to browse to the app data folder on your server. I'm using a Mac, but it will be very similar on Windows. So open the app data share and go to the Let's Encrypt folder here, then nginx, and finally proxy confs. Now this proxy config file here, it assumes you've got a subdomain set up which is meet. And then whatever your domain name is. Now if you didn't want to have that as your subdomain, then you could set up a CNAME with a different name and you'd put in that subdomain here. So if you wanted to have it as Jitsi, you would change this meet here to Jitsi and that would be your subdomain. Okay, so now we're going to copy this file inside this folder here. There it is. And let's go back to our web UI. And now we can restart the Let's Encrypt container. Now what we want to do is have a look at the log quickly. Okay, so we can see there's no errors here at all. At the bottom it says server ready. Now don't worry about this in the blue here, it always says that and it makes absolutely no difference, everything will work fine. So let's close this and open up a new tab and put in the web address for our Jitsi server. There we are, we're straight in and we've got that lovely padlock showing it's secure. Now remember when we set up the environmental variables earlier, we made it so to create a meeting we need a password. So I'm going to create a test meeting at the moment. I'm going to call it Atari and click go. And it's asking me if I want to share my camera. I've only got one camera on this computer and I can share my microphone. So I'm going to click allow. And you can see here it says it's waiting for the host. Now I am the host, so I'm going to click I am the host. And this is where it's asking for a username and password. But we haven't actually set up any users on the server yet. So it's not going to work as yet. So let's click cancel and close this page down. Now what we need to do is we need to go to the container that's named xmpp.meet.jitsi. Click onto it here and go to console. Let's paste in this command from the description, and there's two things we need to change here. We need to change this username here to the username that we want to use, and we need to change this here, the password, to the password that we need to use. Now this part here, the meet.jitsi, that has to be there. Don't change that to anything else it won't work. Now unfortunately when we bash into a container like this, we can't actually press the back arrow and it go back, it just prints some strange characters. So it's probably easier just to delete all of this out, open a text editor, and then paste the command into here first, and then change the username and the password. So now when we've done that, we can just copy this and paste it into the terminal window, complete, and hit enter. Now you get no confirmation, literally it will just come up like this with a line underneath. So now I've created that user, Edward, with the password of Unraid. If you wanted to put in any other users, then you create them now. Okay, so let's close this, and now we should restart this container here. We only need to restart this container because this one does the authentication for the users. We don't need to restart the other containers here. So let's go back to the Jitsi page, and we can see here there's that meeting I created earlier. Now a lot of people worry when they see the meetings they've been in before that those meetings are still there. Actually they're not, it's just saved by your actual browser. If I was to open a private browser window, then you see that list isn't there. That history is only stored locally in the browser that you're using. Anyway, let's go back to the main browser I was using, the one with the history. Okay, so I'm going to click on this Atari meeting again now. I'm going to allow the microphone and camera. Yep, I am the host. Okay, so it's asking for my username. So I'm going to type in Edward and password Unraid and click OK. There we are, it's connecting, obtaining the session ID, and there we are inside of the meeting. Yeah, I know. I've pointed the camera up at the ceiling. We've been on lockdown for a while here in the UK, and I really couldn't be bothered to kind of have a shave and make myself look decent for making this video. So sorry guys, you're going to have to miss out on looking at my handsome face, and we'll just have to carry on. Now if I wanted to add a password to this meeting, I'd go here and I'd click add password, and I'm going to put the password as Unraid again. So now if any of my guests want to join this meeting, they're going to have to know the password of Unraid, so I'd have to tell them that first. Right, so I'm going to start wrapping up this video now. I think it's pretty much come to an end. Oh, actually one last thing. Now there are apps for Jitsi that you can use on Android and iOS, so you can do your video meetings on your cell phone. So with the app on your cell phone, it's slightly different. Here I am on my Android phone, but I'm sure it's pretty similar for iOS. Now you're going to need to go to settings, and then where it says server URL here, we need to put the URL where our Jitsi server's installed. So basically https://meet.yourdomain.com. So obviously it's not literally yourdomain.com, it's whatever your domain name is with the subdomain. So once you've done that, the app will connect to your server, then you can create or join a room. So I'm just going to create one called test here and then click on create join. Again, because I'm creating a room, it's going to ask for my username and password, so I'm going to pop that in here. Then after a few moments it will say connecting, and once connected you can then start using the app and you're in the meeting. So that's a very quick rundown of how to use the Android app. I'm sure the iOS app is pretty much the same, but I don't have an iOS phone to be able to test it with. Okay then, so that brings us to the end of this video. Now I really hope you found it useful and you can use this to set up your own Jitsi server, and you can use it to speak to friends, family and work colleagues. And you can do that all privately on your own server with end-to-end encryption. Now of course, to all of my patrons and supporters out there, thanks a lot guys for supporting me and making it possible for me to make these videos. I really do appreciate it. And thanks to everyone out there who takes the time out to watch my videos. Now if you liked it, then please hit up that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and share this video if you think anyone you know might be interested in it. Anyway guys, it's time for me to go now. But whatever you're up to for the rest of the day, I hope it's good, stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next video.